I feel like our interviews this morning dovetail nicely. A good conversation with Dr. Aaron Riggins at Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College just a little while ago. And now our friend Scott Waller joins us, President and CEO of the Mississippi Economic Council. Scott loves it when it's 97 degrees outside with 85% humidity, so this is his time of the year. Good morning, my friend.
Richard, I tell you what, I'm a lifelong Mississippian, and this weather is something, but there are days I just wonder why. Why? Anyway, great to see you, sir.
I don't want to live in San Diego, but
No.
that whole 75 and sunny for like 340 days out of the year doesn't sound so bad.
So, no, I listened with great interest with the conversation with you and Dr. Riggins, and we had a SWIB executive committee meeting on Monday, and one of the things we spent a lot of time talking about was the construction trades and what's taking place. And again, I think there's so much that's been happening. And you think about over the last 5 years, you mentioned this as you was going out of the last segment about the amount of economic development we've had across the state of Mississippi in the last 5 years. And you think about what's happening in workforce and with the creation of Accelerate Mississippi, we're poised to really continue to see some amazing things happen over the next 10 to 15 years in our state.
If leadership from the governor's mansion through the legislature continues down this path, where Mississippi continues to be aggressive even after the time in office comes to an end for Governor Tate Reeves and his economic record at this point, like there are no holes that you can poke into it. But if that continues, and I've talked about maybe even with you in the past this trajectory that in a lot of ways started with Haley Barbour and continued with Phil Bryant, and it certainly has continued on steroids with Tate Reeves. If it continues, is the only thing that could hold up continued growth a lack of a workforce that can handle the growth?
I think that's the number one issue. I think we have everything else in our favor. I think when it comes to the infrastructure that we're talking about, and I want to talk a little bit about that later because I was actually in D.C. last week at the same event that I know you had earlier this week. You had Chairman Lamar on. The things that we're doing in that area, the site availability, those things that we're putting emphasis in, we're setting ourselves up for great success and even more success than what we've seen. But workforce has to be the key of all of this. How do we create and get people to understand the importance of an available, skilled workforce? And not just those coming out of high school and college, but those that are currently in the workforce. How do we make sure they have opportunities to upskill and reskill and do the things that we really need to create that workforce? Because when you think through what is happening right now in all of different areas, and I mean, and also we think about the importance of the trades, and they're very important, and the emphasis that's being put on those again, finally, in a way that people understand what that's all about. But we're also talking about technology jobs that's come in this state that we've never seen before. So, I mean, we've got a lot of areas we've got to really be focusing our attention on. And I think we've got great leadership, as you said, from the governor's mansion on down. We've got great people running things like Accelerate Mississippi with Dr. Taylor and the work she's doing. We are in position to really see our state continue to be at that top. And I mean, I got tickled this morning early on. You were talking about, and I had never heard that statistics were kind of like a bikini when you made that statement this morning. That one was new to me, but I thought that was great because it does show you a lot, but it doesn't show you everything. But if you look at the data, and we've been talking about this data since the first of the year, because when we were looking at where we were with GDP growth, where we were with personal income growth across the state, we only had 2 quarters to compare it to. But as you know, the entire year of 2024 panned out that Mississippi had the second highest growth in GDP of any state in the country. That doesn't happen by accident. Yeah. And that's where we see a really defined plan of what's taking place, and we just have to keep that momentum going.
Yeah, you've heard the phrase a million times. Yeah, whether you're talking about bell bottoms or whatever else, everything that's old is new again. And I think back, 10, 15 years, and there were people that were kind of in the business community that were visionaries. And they were talking about, look, the need that we have is for coders. We've got to have more computer engineers. We've got to understand the importance of coding. And AI, even though it's been around for a little long time, but artificial intelligence 15 years ago was, compared to where it is today in terms of mainstream, was kind of in its infancy. And now I'm seeing these things that people are like, AI is going to be able to handle those coding jobs that we were talking about 10 years, 15 years ago. But there's no amount of artificial intelligence that can install an HVAC system. There's no amount of artificial intelligence that can maybe design, but can't lay out pipes or electrical grids. And so you talk about sustainability, it's like,
well, there's
a lot there.
There's a lot there. I do want to touch that. I think AI is going to make work easier, but I think we're never going to get to a point where we're not going to have the human element involved in that. So I think that's one of the things that's very important. But as it relates to those types of jobs, yes, it's going to have to be done by someone who knows what they're doing. And there may be technologies that make their job easier. There may be technologies that are part of it, that it's not as the old grunt work that it used to be.
Well, a nail gun is more efficient than a hammer.
A nail gun is much more efficient than a hammer.
But somebody's still got to pull the trigger on the nail gun.
Somebody's got to pull the trigger. You still got to do that. So I think all of those things are having the properly trained people is the key. And I think that's what we're seeing with our community colleges and the way that they're structured things now. They've got, the dollars are there if they prove there are outcomes with it. And I think that's where we're really seeing a difference. It's not just, we're going to put money into a program. Mm-hmm. No, we're going to put money in a program if you can show us that you're putting people into the workforce. And putting people in the workforce in Mississippi is the biggest key to all of that.
Scott Waller is president and CEO of the Mississippi Economic Council. You mentioned that you were in D.C. last week. Chairman Lamar, when we talked earlier this week, said in the 14 years that he served in the legislature, he's never seen anything like this from a presidential administration. So from the federal level, in terms of welcoming in state leaders, in terms of trying to lay out the roadmap for what is happening at the federal level and how it can work in conjunction with the states. Give us your perspective on that.
Well, I think it's important to have that relationship, one. And I think, as he mentioned, he had been planning to go be part of this conference. It's the Transportation Investment Advocacy Center does a workshop every year. I've been fortunate enough to serve on the TAC Council, which is kind of the smaller group that kind of talks about the issues we want to bring to the forefront. And Mississippi, with what we have been doing in transportation, and I know that the biggest thing was we finally got some dedicated funds through increasing the fuel use tax for road use. But even if you go back to 2018 in the special session, the work that was done by the legislature and Chairman Lamar was very involved in that process of moving some of the dollars. I jokingly called it among the council members when we were meeting the day before. I called it our program of Powerball for potholes, where we're moving dollars from the lottery into and it's being used very, very well by the Department of Transportation for maintenance of our two-lane highways across the state, which are so important, the arteries that get us to our four-lane highways. So it was very good to have them there. It just so happened that the other came up, and there was a large group of legislators up there. We got to visit with some of them, but they were just amazed at just what they were able to learn about what's happening within the federal government and within the administration. And I think that open communication is going to go so far in helping us be more successful in the state.
We got more coming up with Scott Waller, including a message that comes in from Chase in Columbus on the C Spire text line. He says, what do we have in mind for making sure continued economic growth doesn't eventually drive cost of living up for the average Mississippians? He references Central Texas and Eastern Tennessee, where it's been tough for people that have been there for a really long time. We'll tackle that question and a whole lot more with Scott Waller on the other side of this timeout. It's Mornings with Richard Cross on SuperTalk Mississippi. Scott Waller is my guest, president and CEO at the Mississippi Economic Council. So let's go to that question from Chase, because I think it's an interesting and relevant question. I think he was pointing specifically to that Austin, Texas area that saw the rapid growth and just the spiraling cost in terms specifically of the housing market. Seen it in East Tennessee. You've seen it in the Greenville, South Carolina area. Areas that have had big growth. There is some growing pain that goes along with that. How do you How do you thread the needle with those two?
That is a tough one, because what we're trying to do and focus our attention on, and I know I'll remember this. I'll always remember this, that the first time I sat down with Tate Reeves, between the time he got elected governor and was inaugurated as governor, he and I had a conversation about what he wanted to focus his attention on. And one of the things that didn't surprise me, because I heard him say it before, but he really spent some time talking about how do we grow per capita income? How do we increase income for our citizens who live in the state of Mississippi?
I've heard him talk about that sitting on one of your stages as recently as just a few months ago.
Exactly. And so he has put a lot of effort into saying we've got to raise this. So that's what, as I mentioned earlier, when you see that we are among the top states in income growth, that's an important part of providing us the ability to do things, buy things. Fortunately, we are still a very low-cost state, as it is for the cost of living. And I think that's one of those things we've got to kind of, how do you juxtapose those two things? Because as people have more money to spend, they'll spend more, they want to buy a little more expensive house, a little more expensive car, whatever the case may be. So that tends to drive up the prices. But I think the key is the one thing that can be done from an economic standpoint is to, one, keep taxes low and try to make sure that, one of the biggest problems Texas faces is they had astronomical property taxes. That is, they may not have a state income tax, but they got astronomical property taxes. Sure. So if we can continue to keep our taxes low, our income tax is low now, and there's a process that's been put in place to phase it out. We've just got to make sure we're able to provide those things without raising it in other places. And I think that's how we can, there's going to be certain things that we can avoid. The cost of goods is going to be determined by other things. But what we can do as a state is to try to make sure we're keeping those things in line to make it so that we can take advantage of the growth in income that we're seeing among those that are working in our state.
Scott Waller, President and CEO of the Mississippi Economic Council. MEC has worked in conjunction with and closely with a couple of other organizations, including the Mississippi Manufacturers Association and BIPEC. We got the news, I don't know, a year or so ago that there was an attempt to merge these three organizations into a single organization. Where are we on the timeline?
We are right on time.
Okay.
We are very fortunate. A couple of months ago, our executive committees of the organizations signed a letter of intent to merge. Okay. So we are in the process of putting all those things in place of what it's going to take to merge the organizations. Just about 2 or 3 weeks ago, we announced that the name of the new organization will be the Mississippi Business Alliance. It will serve as the State Chamber of Commerce. It will also be the affiliate for the National Association of Manufacturers. So again, we will be representing the new organization will be representing all sectors of the economy, but we'll have a strong manufacturing presence. It's a big part of our economy in this state. We got to make sure that the voice of manufacturing is heard as well as everything else. And we benchmarked ourselves with some other states that already are combined with these organizations, and one of them has very similar numbers to what we have in Mississippi as it relates to manufacturing. And they said, look, manufacturing drives the entire economy. We've got to make sure we keep that at the forefront. So, again, we're very excited about where we are. If all goes as planned, that we will be bringing a definitive agreement to our full boards probably by the end of September to create the new organization, and then over the next 2 to 3 months, standing that organization up, and then all the assets and liabilities of the existing three organizations will be put into there so that we can then have a single organization as we go forward. And I'm so excited about this. It's something that has been on my radar for several years. It's something that for the last couple of years, John McKay at MMA and Derek Easley at BIPEC and I have had multiple hours of conversations and planning and really the volunteer leadership from our members that have taken the time to give us the insight that they have to make this happen. It's an exciting time for Mississippi. I think not only will the business community benefit from a single organization, our state is going to benefit from a single organization.
So you mentioned John and Derek, and two super talented guys, and they've got really good teams around them, as you do at MEC. Is this just a merging of staffs as well, and then kind of a redistribution of responsibilities within that new leadership organizational structure?
That is how we've got it structured right now. There's been some staffing changes. Derek has one staffer, and so that's a little easier for him. Yeah. There's been some staffing changes both at MEC and MMA over the last 2 to 3 years, and we were we already had this kind of discussion taking place, and we was like, okay, let's figure out where are the strengths. What does the staff look like at MMA? How does it complement the staff at MEC, and try to make sure that we were doing that. So, I made a decision a couple of years ago that we just did some contract work with some folks to fill in some gaps so that when this time came, we would be better positioned for all of our staff to have an opportunity to move into the new organization and be successful.
Scott, I feel like anytime we talk, or anytime I have somebody else on and we're talking about economic development projects in Mississippi, we get a similar question. It comes in on the C Spire text line. And I understand the question. There are people in parts of rural Mississippi, and it feels like specifically Southwest Mississippi is mentioned regularly, where it's like somebody's raising their hand and they're saying, what about us? We see these projects that are going in different parts of the state. What can we do for Southwest Mississippi as well? This person says, specifically, we've got an abundance of timber, but not enough mills. Just an example. So when you look at these, I know there's so many factors that go into place, right? Local leadership, support, everybody pulling in the same direction, availability of workforce, all of that stuff. Are there parts of Mississippi that need more attention, and is that on the radar?
I think it's on the radar, and I had an opportunity again on Monday. Man, Monday is a busy day. I had an opportunity to be with Bill Cork for a little while, and he made a presentation kind of talking about what has been happening in economic development. And when you think about, he showed a map of where all the projects have gone, and it really is all across the state. And I know some areas probably feel like, well, there's just not as much coming here. I can assure you the state doesn't take a winners-loser approach to where they want to put projects. In many cases, it's the site selectors that make those decisions. But I think the key is how do you do a better job of kind of selling yourself? And I think there's been some things that have really done. There's certain parts of the state that are unfortunately not seeing the same type of growth that you see in others. And I think that's where, how do you do it from a regional perspective, I think is where it really has to come down to. And you think back to years ago, I started my career as a sports writer of all things many years ago in Columbus, Mississippi. There wasn't a lot happening in Columbus back then. That area was really not attracting anything. It was just not going well. And then all of a sudden, they created the Columbus Lounge Link. Right. And they brought in a guy by the name of Joe Max Higgins, and I know you've probably talked to Joe Max a few times, and he's a fireball without question. But then they took it to another level when they brought in Clay and Oktibbeha counties and created the Golden Triangle Link and started thinking regionally. Think about what happened in the Tupelo area with the Pool Alliance, the Pontotoc Union Lee County Alliance, that ultimately landed the Toyota manufacturing facility there at Blue Springs. Blue Springs actually isn't in Lee County. Tupelo gets all the credit, but it's actually in Union County. So, but it's because of that partnership with those regions that made it work. So, use those as examples and try to figure out who is it. How can you build that alliance with those around you from a regional perspective, and don't worry about where the actual project lands within that region. Just get it to that region. Everybody will benefit from it. That's the key, in my opinion.
Yeah, and we've seen that. And there are other, I know where I live in Oxford that there's work going on with a multi-county conglomerate that's trying to make sure that they're making decisions along those lines as well. It's a stronger together thing, and I guess different people bring different skills or different resources to the table, and you figure out a way to make it work, and it turns out to be a boon for the region.
Without question.
Scott, always a pleasure.
Thank you
I hope
so
we didn't
much.
miss anything today. If we did, we can do this again soon.
Huge episode. Always enjoy it, Richard. Thank you so much.
As do I. Scott Waller, President CEO of the Mississippi Economic Council. soon, somewhat soon, to be the MBA, the Mississippi Business Alliance. Half an hour left with you. It's Mornings with Richard Cross. We'll get to some of your messages on the C Spire text line and a whole lot more right after this.
It's just a